after the Sermon on the Mount, which Kathy did a great job kind of summarizing, and all of us had our homework for last week to summarize that. Jesus basically came down from the mountain, and it said that great crowds had followed, and that he immediately started his healing ministry. And so chapter 8 is kind of known as the miracle chapters, what Barclay had called it at one point. He healed the leper that Kathy talked about last week. Then on the way to Capernaum, it was the Sabbath, and he healed a possessed man in Mark. It doesn't talk about that in Matthew, but if you read the same story in Mark, he had already healed a demon-possessed man, and then he healed the centurion's servant, and then he arrived at Peter's house, and he healed his mother-in-law. And so all of this on the Sabbath, and we know that you're not supposed to do too much on the Sabbath, right? So we're going to start with Matthew 8:16 and read that section in the book. So someone want to do that for us? I think it's 16 through 17.
I got it. And when it was late in the day, they brought to him many who were in the power of evil spirits. And he cast out the spirits with a word and healed all those who were ill. This happened that the saying spoken through the prophet Isaiah might be fulfilled. He took our weaknesses and carried our sins.
Yeah. And it might not be that clear here in Matthew, but the story as it's repeated in Mark, Mark makes it really clear that this is the Sabbath. And so here at the very beginning of this passage, it says, when evening came. And for those of you who kind of read in the book ahead, for this lesson, do you remember why it says late in the evening, why it would have been late in the evening before people started coming?
I guess he went to synagogue that day.
Because the Sabbath was ending and they can start working.
They said that the Sabbath
start working
initially when 2 stars can be seen in the sky. And so that's why it's specified when evening came, because if it had been earlier than that, it would have been Sabbath. And so the people coming to him wouldn't have been able to carry sick people or, bring, any kind of load. I think that they said that it's illegal to carry a burden on the Sabbath, anything that weighed more than 2 dried figs. And so, that's not very much when you think about it.
And I think there's also a prohibition about how far you can travel too.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So therefore, they wouldn't have been able to carry. So here at the end of the day, and here Jesus had come, probably been to the synagogue, had healed a demon-possessed man, had healed the centurion, had healed Peter's mother-in-law. No doubt he had preached during the day at synagogue. He had done all of these things, and now it was finally evening. And usually when it's evening time, you get to take off your shoes and rest a little bit. And Jesus was, all of these people that started coming, to be healed. And so at a time that Jesus may have expected to have some rest, he was surrounded by people wanting to be healed. And what did he do here? It says he drove out the spirits with a word and healed all the sick. And so Barclay was saying that as long as there's someone in need, there's no rest, for Jesus. And he kind of compares that to as disciples. And here are the different things he said about disciples of Christ. We cannot seek rest while there are others to be helped or healed. We will find our own weariness refreshed and our own weakness strengthened in the service of others. As the demand grows, our strength will grow, and we will be able to go on for the sake of others when we cannot take another step for ourselves. And I wonder how you all feel. Have you all been so weak and weary at times that you felt like you couldn't do another thing? And then for your family or for others have been able to find that strength to move on?
I once fell asleep in the middle of eating dinner and the food flipped off the table and wound up all over the floor.
Okay, we want more details.
I was working at Goodwill. There is no tired like Goodwill
Okay.
tired.
Well, as a mom, anyone who's a mom know that if you're sick when your kids are sick, you have to keep functioning. Somebody's got to take care of the sick kids. So the only time I've ever been, I guess, that exhausted was when my kids were sick and I was sick. And luckily that didn't happen often.
I think
And
when
it
I
doesn't
retired-
matter the age of the kid.
Correct. Correct. I need some juice.
Barbara fell asleep in labor.
Gosh.
A long time, so you know, it was only in between the contractions I woke up then, you know.
How
Well,
long?
Michael's mother was asleep the whole time. They put her to sleep back in the 50s.
Yeah.
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 I expect that was true of all of our mothers.
Oh, yeah. My mother
I-
had so much ether when she was delivering me that the next day my father still couldn't stand to be in her. He came to see her and got sleepy sitting next to her. She still had so much ether.
Whoa.
in her.
Wow.
Wow.
So
I
it's
slept through
amazing. I have a
mine.
brain, but
I slept through
How long-
mine.
Barbara, how long was your labor?
Gosh.
It wasn't that long.
Well, no, I mean, it was a full day.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So
That's
that'd be good.
long.
She,
But that was your first baby.
she
you know.
did natural childbirth both times.
Wow.
Oh, goodness.
you know, when I
Claire's story probably beats them all.
Hers was pretty, yeah. Mm.
No, I worked with someone who told me a similar story that he came home from work, made a huge bowl of cereal, got in the bed, fell asleep immediately, and the bowl of cereal and all the milk went all over the mattress, and they had to throw away the mattress.
Oh, yeah. Milk is nasty.
Mm.
Yeah.
Well, my mother had 3 surgeries within a 13-month period while she was still working. And she told us, well, actually, Daddy kind of figured it out. She went to get in the bed and she was so tired, she fell asleep in that process and was in the bed in her robe with her glasses on and her slippers still on. She made it to the edge of the bed and then just kind of went,
That was it.
yeah, that was it.
My mother was a registered nurse and she would sleep. She had 11 to 7. And so she would be up all night at the hospital and she would come home. And one day Daddy went up to wake her up in bed and he thought she was bleeding. There was brown stuff all over the bed and she had taken a chocolate bar to bed. And so he thought it was blood, but it's
Oh, my gosh.
a chocolate bar.
gosh, but you know, the emotional exhaustion can be really devastating
Mhm.
at times.
Yeah.
So, you know, after I retired from Louisa, it was months before I felt like I had any emotional energy for anything.
But Claire, I think that you had mentioned at one time that working for Goodwill was so satisfying to you.
It was physically exhausting. I mean, we moved furniture all day, but it was so emotionally rewarding to see people who made their living off of reselling brand new items that they found at Goodwill on, like on eBay. I knew if I didn't go to work, there would be people literally, if I didn't sort out those new Nikes that were in the bin, mixed in with everything else, there would be people who wouldn't eat.
Mhm.
Wow.
Plus the people that are able to get things that they need at a price that usually they can just barely afford.
Mhm.
Um,
So let's move on now to the next set of verses from 18 to 22. Someone could
I'll
read.
read.
Okay, thank you.
When Jesus saw the great crowd surrounding him, he gave orders to go away across to the other side. A scribe came to him. "Teacher," he said, "I will follow you wherever you may be going." Jesus said to him, "The foxes have lairs and the birds of the sky have places where they may lodge, but the Son of Man has nowhere where he may lay his head." Another of his disciples said, "Lord, let me first go away and bury my father." And Jesus said to him, "Follow me and let the dead bury their dead."
Now, Barclay notes that this section seems to be kind of out of place in this chapter of miracles. But then I don't know, what did you all feel when you were reading this passage?
Well, until I read the explanation, I didn't get it that there was a miracle in that paragraph.
Mhm.
Right. I
Yeah.
agree with Kitten.
Yeah, I didn't either. You know, but to think, you know, I guess it was a little surprising though to hear a scribe, you know, saying, "Teacher, I will go wherever you will go," you know, because you always hear that the scribes are the bad guys a lot of times.
Well, I always thought that only Nicodemus and Joseph of Arimathea of the Jewish leadership followed him. I was surprised to see this third person. So I wonder, as I read through scripture, I'm going to look for more Jewish people who were supporters or believers in Jesus before he died. There obviously are more than I knew of.
Oh, yeah.
You know, and I think it helped me a little bit when I was reading this to put it in perspective of what had happened that day, that Jesus had done all of these healings, been to synagogue. It was the Sabbath, but for him to then say, they say, I will follow you wherever you go. And for him to say, you know, foxes have and birds have nests, but the Son of Man has no place to lay his head. He was tired, probably at that time. And to say that, and then in addition, with the other disciple that comes to him saying, "Follow me, let me go bury my father first," and he says, "No, follow me, you know, and let the dead bury their own dead." That was always confusing to me until I heard a little bit more about at least the way Barclay was explaining it.
Well, we learned that when we did something in the past. This was not the first time I'd read that the guy was basically saying, I need to wait until my dad dies.
Yeah. Right. You know, that the Jewish tradition was, I must bury my father. For those who hadn't heard, was a popular Jewish phrase that his father probably hadn't actually died.
Right, because if his father was dead when he made that statement, he would not have been there to make the statement.
Mm-hmm. Right. Right.
Well, but in the Jewish culture, as in many other cultures, a lot of responsibility falls to the oldest son to take care of the family when the dad dies. So on the one hand, I understand.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Barclay he had another explanation with regard to that. With they were suggested that maybe there was a mistake in the translation from Aramaic to Greek, that leave the burying of his father to the official buriers, that somewhere in Ezekiel it had claimed that there were official, at least hinted to their official buriers or people who go and bury people. But he says that's probably not it. It was probably the most likely explanation was that his father hadn't died and may not even be sick, but he had responsibility to his family, and he couldn't go and follow Jesus until he had fulfilled all of his obligations, you know, to his family, was what Barclay had said was the most likely explanation for that. right, it was the Jewish sacred duty to bury their dead parents. And so Jesus kind of really showed his knowledge for human nature, that, oh yeah, I'll do that. I'll procrastinate. I won't do something until I have to do it or whatever. And that if these people didn't follow him now, they probably never would come and follow him. Barclay tells a little story about H.G. Wells, who was in a job as an apprentice draper, and that he knew that there was no future in it for him. But one day he just had this really inward voice that told him, if you don't get out of this now, you're never going to get out of it. And so he just, on faith, just quit and went. And it says that's why he got out, and that's why he became H.G. Wells. So God may give us that strength of decision to save us from not seizing the moment. And I've heard stories from you, Sarah, about certain times in your career where you've really, maybe not until after the fact, have seen how God is kind of directing you to certain professions or career changes.
Putting opportunities in front of me that I never would have thought to go after, on my own.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So they Barclay kind of defines the story about the scribe who says, teacher, I will follow you wherever you go, in that Jesus is, when he says foxes have no dens and birds have no nests, and Barclay was kind of describing that Jesus's reaction to the scribe was that before you can follow me, because the scribe saying, oh, I'm all excited, I want to come with you, I'll follow you, he told him the teacher, which was a great honor for the scribe to call anyone a teacher, and that Jesus was kind of saying, this is in the heat of the moment, but before you follow me, you need to think about what you're doing. I have no place to lay my head, and that following me, you will end up having to take up the cross. And so before you get all excited and do it, you better think. And Barclay actually goes into some, shares with us some other verses in Matthew, where he wanted the disciples to make sure that they knew what they were doing. Whoever does not take up their cross and follow me is not worthy of me. That's in Matthew 10. Matthew 19, if you want to be perfect, go sell your possessions, give it to the poor, and you will have treasure in heaven. Then come follow me. And then he also refers to Luke, where if anyone comes to me and does not hate father and mother, wife and child, brothers and sisters, yes, even their own life, such a person cannot be my disciple. I mean, that's hardcore here. I can't imagine, I can't imagine just breaking all ties to follow Christ.
Is there any wiggle room in that term hate? How is that, what was the original word used, and have we translated it properly?
Get rid of a big cat first.
Go for the etymology of the words. All right.
That'll be your homework for next week.
Right. Yeah, because Barclay doesn't talk about it.
No, he didn't talk about it here. I think it was really, he titles this particular area with regard to the scribe as the cost of following Jesus. You'd have to know that when you're going to follow Christ, that there are costs involved. That it's not an easy thing to do. And you have to really be dedicated, to that. So he was saying, we want, and he kind of, I think he paraphrased here somewhere. He says, well, he was paraphrasing this under the tragedy of the unseen moment with the disciple. And he says, you are feeling at the moment that you must get out of that dead society in which you move. You say you will get out when the years have passed, when your father has died. Get out now, or you will never get out at all. So, that is also kind of telling someone, you've got to leave your current responsibilities and take up the cross.
I think that's a general characteristic, something about Jesus knowing the nature of people. It's kind of like the Nike slogan, just do it. It's this is a weak comparison, but many times I'm just going to do something tomorrow. I'll start my diet tomorrow. I'll start exercise tomorrow. Anything that requires real dedication. It's real easy to say, well, I'm just going to do that in the morning.
I think that for me, it's been the experience that I've had with my faith has been since childhood. I didn't go to church very much. When I did go to church and Sunday school, I wasn't really engaged heavily with it. There were a lot of kids there. It was very cliquish, and I was kind of a tomboy, and I was off out doing these other things and didn't really join in with the group. And then I think when I first started, and even with baptism, baptism for me was more, it was the age when I was supposed to be baptized. And so I got baptized, and I didn't see it didn't really make as much of a difference in my life. And so many people, that I hear in our church who have been baptized, in how meaningful that was. And I think it was just because the way it happened in my life, that I felt that when I really started, when faith became important to me was more when we started going to the Bonner Christian Church and getting to know people there and learning more about it and feeling a part of a group. But to think of when I read these passages about dedicating your life and leaving your family, I don't know whether I would have the strength to be that kind of a Christian. And if I'm not that kind of a Christian, am I a Christian?
Well, I think not everybody is chosen to be an apostle. And when I was growing up, there were 5 kids. And if my mother had taken up her cross and left the house, Daddy would have been in a pickle. Instead, she stayed home and she raised us, and she taught us, right from wrong and good from bad. And that was her role. Not everybody is meant to chuck it.
Right. And then I always think of the story about the starfish, where you throw one back and, you don't think that you do a lot, but then just the little things that you do sometimes mean so much, to other people.
Yeah, and maybe that one person that you made a difference to then goes on and makes a difference to hundreds of people.
Right.
And you never know. But in terms of having faith, the church I grew up in Danville, where I was baptized, there were twin girls, and one of them felt called to be a missionary, a foreign missionary, and she had some kind of congenital heart defect, and it was not serious enough to impact her life in America if she had chosen to stay put. But if she wanted to be a missionary, it had to be fixed. And the doctor very strongly urged her not to, because it was a fairly dangerous operation, and she insisted. and died on the operating table.
Uh,
Yeah. And so talking about having faith,
mhm.
she had it. I'm nowhere near that.
Well, it reminds me of that passage in Jane Eyre where what's his name wants her to marry him and go be a missionary in Africa. And she says, I don't feel the calling to do that. I know if I did, it would kill me.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now I've got to go back and reread Jane Eyre because I don't remember that part.
Mhm.
She goes back to the, who is it? No, that's another story.
When she runs away, Sarah,
Mhm.
when she runs away on her wedding day and she ends up in that
Okay.
minister's home and they end up being distant relatives.
Oh, I really got to go back because I don't remember that either.
Jane Eyre
Oh,
is
no,
years
she
ago.
actually adopts them as relatives. They really aren't her relatives, I don't think.
Yeah,
But
they
anyway.
are.
Yeah, they come to find out they're distantly related.
They are related.
And she gets this big inheritance from a relative in like Antigua, and she shares it with them.
Yeah, 20,000 pounds, and she shares 5,000 each with the guy that wants her to go to Africa and his two sisters.
I thought Jane Eyre was poor.
She
She
inherits.
was until she got the inheritance.
Yeah.
I got to go back and read it.
Oh yeah. Just rent the movie. 2 hours and you're done.
Or no, what I did, because I just read it, you get the Libby app on your phone, which lets you borrow from the library from the comfort of your couch.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And Jane Eyre is always there, so.
Oh, okay, good, good.
Let's calm the storm. Let's read the next passage.
All right,
23.
I'll read it, 23 through 7.
27, yeah.
When he embarked on the boat, his disciples followed him. And look you, a great upheaval arose on the sea, so that the boat was hidden by the waves. Ooh, and he was sleeping. They came and wakened him. Lord, they said, save us, we're perishing. He said to them, why are you such cowards, you whose faith is little? Then, when he had been roused from sleep, he rebuked the winds and the sea, and there was a great calm. The men were amazed. What kind of man is this, they said, for the winds and the sea obey him.
He had to be really tired to be sleeping during that storm. But we've heard all of the different healings and everything. We're still on that same day. And here he is asleep in the boat with waves coming up. I mean, I would have woken him up.
That's a parable, and be careful what you ask for. Because if you're in a sailboat, you don't want calm wind and calm seas. You don't go anywhere.
But you don't want the waves crashing over the boat either.
I mean, most of these people were fishermen. They probably knew when it was rough weather and when it was, when it was something they can control and when they couldn't control it. But Barclay does go into explaining the Sea of Galilee. That was really interesting where, it's very small. Some people will even just call it a lake. 13 miles, 8 miles at its wide, north to south, and 8 miles at its widest. But he talked about, because of the nature of it being in a valley, that it was kind of like a wind tunnel, and that the warm climate, creates danger in the wind, and so it can be calm one minute and raging the next. And had 2 eyewitnesses that Barclay includes some information about people who actually had been on the Sea of Galilee and what their experiences were. And they talked about, one of the witnesses was talking about being on the sea and camping out, and for fierce winds for 3 days and nights, and they had to double pin their ropes, and they had waves crashing, up coming around close to the tents, and one person described it as wind coming from all directions at the same time. And so from 1 minute it can be smooth and glassy, and 20 minutes later it can be raging, just because of the nature of the environment and the landscape and the climate there. But yeah, the boat was hidden with troughs of water, and Jesus was asleep. And in Barclay adds that in Mark, we see that he had been using that boat as a pulpit on the shore to address the people, before they went out on the sea. And so he was really exhausted, but the disciples were terrified. This is one of those times where, in addition to healing people, that Jesus was even in control. And what was so surprising to the disciples was he can even control nature. He can control the winds and the waves. And so what can't he do? So much more than calming a storm at sea was what Mark saying about this, that said that when the meaning is that wherever Jesus is, the storm of life becomes calm. In the presence of Jesus, the most terrible of tempests turns to peace. In every storm that shakes the human heart, there is peace with Jesus Christ. And what are your experiences with storms you've had in your life, and any peace that you have found with Jesus?
Well,
When I hear that, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I've told this story many times, and you've heard it. The most tranquil, peaceful time in my life, the experience, was when I was in Vietnam, and we were getting, a lot of rockets and mortars and things like that, and my nerves were kind of frazzed. And I got on top of a bunker and looked up and said, give me peace or take me. And it was instantaneously peace. It's the most peaceful, this is almost 50 years ago. And it's the most peaceful experience I've ever had in my life. And
How long did it last? Minutes or seconds?
I'd say minutes. I'd say minutes.
Or a lifetime?
Well, I often wonder, in my life's journey after that, I had a lot of ups and downs, and but I mean that's and you would think maybe I would have had a closer experience with God all these years, but it was like a miracle. It was really something. It's very difficult to explain.
When I read Barclay's explanation of the geography around the Sea of Galilee and that whole wind tunnel idea, how it could go from calm to raging in 30 minutes, it made me think about those canyons in, I think, Arizona near the Grand Canyon, where if it rains 10 miles away, the water rushes and there are people hiking in the canyon and they just get washed away and drowned because of something that happens miles away, and they don't know the water's coming, and you really have to check the weather to hike those canyons, because it can be a dry, dusty 100-degree canyon, and then when the water gets there, it's 20 feet deep, washing you away.
Nancy, did you have something?
I was just when you were talking about the storm and the calm, it brought to mind that Amish community where they had all of those children killed in the schoolhouse, and there wasn't any rage, and it was just that they were truly living their faith in the midst of tragedy, and that always struck me.
Mhm.
And they were, I seem to think they were little girls, and not that there's any difference than little girls and little boys, but I always, you know, little girls strike a deeper chord with me because I have daughters.
Yeah, and the shooting in the Atlanta church, the same thing is true of that.
Yeah,
People were in a church where they should have been safe, I guess.
right.
Well, you know, I've heard so many people talk about how wonderful and forgiving those people were. And I grew up in Charleston, and I'm very familiar with that church. And I've watched some videos of some meetings, some community meetings having to do with civil rights issues and such. And there was criticism from the Black community of the forgiveness, in that, you know, we have forgiven and forgiven and forgiven, and, you know, it hasn't made much difference. And in recent years, you know, we have risen up, we've made our voice heard, and it seems to be making a difference. And it struck a chord with me a little bit. It struck a chord with me a little bit about Richmond, in that, you know, we've been talking about, and statues are a very touchy issue. And I live a block from them, you know, so but we've been talking about doing something about those statues for forever. And we would, you know, it would talk about it, and then the talk would go away. But once people started taking some action, and from where I stood or stand and saw Monument Avenue, you know, on a very frequent basis, it was as many Caucasians or more that were, you know, involved in activities. It seemed like at that point that action was taken. So you know, sometimes I guess we can question the peaceful and forgiving, and, you know, where it goes from there.
Well,
That's the subject.
that's been a conundrum, you know, about being forgiving and yet standing up for what's right, or what you feel, you know, everyone has their own what's right. But what, you know, I just always remember, what would Christ do, you know, in this situation? And it's very hard because you feel like you need to speak up when you see injustice. And that's a part of what the church is responsible for too, as well as individuals. But it's hard to know the mixed message of when to do, what kind of action to take. And, you know, I don't think correct action is going out and killing somebody, you know. But you know, one of the things that some of the conversations that we've had in Jamie's book study on Black and White, disrupting racism one friendship at a time. And it's, you know, how do we make a change? And sometimes it's like the starfish again, you know, it's being kind and forgiving within our own lives, and yet trying to stand up for the rights of others and trying to make some kind of social change. I mean, we wouldn't be voting now, I wouldn't be able to vote now if it weren't for other people who stood up. And any kind of good that seems to come, you know, often it has to come through some kind of standing up and making a stand in some way by some people. So that's always been an issue that I've had, is what do you do?
I think
And-
it's an ongoing process as our lives change, as situations change, as the world changes. It's an ongoing process for us to assess what's the right thing for us to do as Christians. What would Jesus do? What, you know, that old WWJD, you know, became so canned, but it really is extremely important, I think.
Calm the storm.
I think my difficulty is that if I had been in the boat, I would have woken Jesus up, because I would have been looking for the fastest solution. It wouldn't have been that I had no faith. I had total faith, but here's the solution, you know, just. I'm
That
sorry,
was-
what?
Excuse me, sorry about that, Claire. We're trying to work out an issue for the service. We'll apologize for the interruption.
No problem. So I guess my question is, was he rebuking them because they didn't trust that everything would work out okay? Or was he saying, you shouldn't have woken me, you should have just known that it would have worked out on its own?
Yeah, you of little faith.
But I would have had, because of my faith, I would have gone to him and said, Jesus, wake up, you can fix this.
Right.
I'm with you. I beat you. I might have beat you there, you know.
I like your perspective, Claire. I agree. When I know someone can help me, yeah, I'm going there because I believe they can help me.
Let's see if we can finish chapter 8. Who wants to read the next set of verses? 28 to 34.
I'll read. And when he had come to the other side, to the territory of the Gadarenes, 2 demon-possessed men met him as they emerged from the tombs. They were very fierce, so that no one was able to pass by that road. And look, you, they shouted, what have we to do with you, you Son of God? Have you come to torture us before the proper time? A good distance away from them, a herd of many pigs was grazing. The devils urged Jesus, if you cast us out, send us into the herd of pigs. He said to them, be gone. They came out and went into the herd of pigs. And look you, the whole herd rushed down the cliff into the sea and died in the waters. Those who were herding them fled and went away into the town and related the whole story and told of the things which had happened to the demon-possessed men. And look you, the whole town came out to meet Jesus, and when they saw him, they urged him to depart from their districts.
I love that. And look, you, it's been used 3 or 4 times in the last few. Hey, you,
Yeah.
look at. Barclay is saying that's unsure where this exactly happens, that in Matthew, they list one city or one area, region. In Mark, they list another region. There's a group of monks out there somewhere who actually believe it was a little north of I think it's called Hippus, because that's the only place they say in that area that has the big tall cliffs where pigs might have, you know, gone over. So, but it was somewhere on the eastern shore of the sea. The boat went across on the eastern shore, and they think that the one area near a place called Gadara was, they said that they would have been outside of Gadara. That was only like 6 miles away inland from the sea. And so they said, since they were coming off of the boat and getting out, that a lot of the tombs and the places where they would have grazed any kind of livestock would probably be way outside of the town area. So they think that that was an area where this might have happened, or the story is being described at. But Barclay goes into, in the ancient world, that it was widely believed that in demon possession, that just like we hear how many angels would fit on the head of a pin or a needle, they thought demons were everywhere. And specifically in areas that were unclean, like tomb areas, and they list a whole lot of, areas, unclean areas, tombs, places where there wasn't any clean water, in howling deserts, lonely travelers at night. Demons were just everywhere. And when I was reading this, I think I just read something about COVID and everything else, and it was like, we have little demons everywhere, these little germs everywhere, kind of a thing. So I can kind of understand that.
Well, we also know that it would have been the guys saying, "Hey, you were not Jewish," and it wasn't in a
Right.
Jewish settlement. So, I mean, that there was probably some animosity already there, between groups.
Yeah, this was a Gentile area, and you know that if for nothing else because of the pigs,
Right.
And in Mark, I think that they actually mentioned that they mentioned the herd was like 2,000. Can you imagine 2,000 pigs being herded like sheep or something? That type of thing. But any kind of an illness that you might have was blamed on these demons. And one of the thoughts was that they gained entry by settling on food that we eat. So again, that's kind of the germ kind of a idea. So they come to the other side of the sea, and he was confronted by 2 men that were possessed in Matthew. When you have the story in Mark, it was only one person that they list in this particular story. And in Mark, they provide a lot more detail about the man. And it said, in Mark, it says, this man lived in tombs, and no one could bind him anymore, not even with a chain, for he had often been chained hand and foot, but he tore the chains apart and broke the irons on his feet. No one was strong enough to subdue him. Night and day among the tombs and in the hills, he would cry out and cut himself with stones. So gives a little bit more of a description of how wild these people were. And then Mark, it's saying, no one could pass by. They were so afraid, of these people. But Jesus actually, they actually come and address Jesus and address him as, what do you want with us, Son of Man? And so it's like these evil creatures in these people recognize him. And we've seen that before in our studies, where any kind of evil will recognize Christ for who he is. And there was it was thought or widely believed that when the Messiah came to judge, that all the demons would be destroyed. And that's one reason that Barclay gives for the demon-possessed men, saying, what do you want with us, Son of God? Have you come here to torture us before the appointed time? So they were so convinced that they needed some kind of a visual demonstration. And I always wondered, why did they want to be put into the pigs? you know. And Barclay kind of goes into saying that they wanted that people who really believe that they're possessed might need some kind of visual demonstration to prove that they aren't. And so moving the demons from the people to the pigs and having the pigs go into the water, they say that it was kind of known that water kills demons. So why not have it rain, you know? Is maybe is rain going to kill all the demons?
Well, the pigs were pork and pork was unclean.
Yeah, for the Jewish people, right? But for the madmen, they weren't unclean because they were most likely Gentiles.
Mhm.
Wash your hands.
Wash your hands. That's it.
I can
So-
understand why the town people weren't particularly happy, because that was a lot of revenue that just went for a swim.
Right. And one of the things that Barclay says is one of the major discussions about these passages is centered around all of these pigs being killed. You know, that how many pigs is worth the soul of a person, you know, to take these demons out, you know. But
When I used to read this passage, I used to think the townspeople were upset because Jesus was very powerful and they didn't know how to control him. But Barclay says the townspeople were upset because of the loss of the pigs. They wanted Jesus to go away so they didn't lose any more revenue. I always thought it was because they were afraid of Jesus's power.
mhm. Yeah, well, they say that when the pig herders went to town, they reported everything that happened, including what happened to the demon possessed people. So we assume that they knew that these people were healed, or that the demons were removed from them, and yet they still came out and said, "You got to get out of here, Jesus. You know, we don't want you around here." And so Barclay is, like you said, he's treating it in the manner that it was because of losing all of it. Can you imagine a village losing their food for the next, how you know, for the year, you know, with losing all of those pigs? And Barclay says, many of us do not care what happens to anyone as long as our profits and comfort are preserved. We must take care that we do not resent helping others when it reduces our own privileges. And at the same time, we're getting ready now to move into chapter 9 next week. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, we've got to sign off for church, but next week we're going to be, this is one of the first shadows of the gathering storm, they say. The people, you know, rejecting Jesus because of what he did. And so next week, in chapter 9, we have Jesus starting to be accused of blasphemy and morality, a number of things. So we have to sign off now because of church. So we'll see you all in church.